Hi, are you a first-time buyer and have you heard of the stamp duty holiday that was announced by the UK government this week? In this video, I'm going to be specifically breaking down the stamp duty holiday and the benefits that were announced by the government. And at the end of this video, I'm going to explain why I personally think that the stamp duty holiday is not going to benefit first-time buyers.
Get strong.
Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Arjun and this is the Nimble Nomad, the channel where we discuss my tips, tricks and hacks to survive and thrive in the UK. In this video, I'm going to be specifically talking about stamp duty and the stamp duty holiday that was announced by the government this week. So if you're a first-time buyer and you're really unclear about how the stamp duty works, or if you're just generally buying and you aren't clear on what the stamp duty holiday meant or the announcement meant, then this video is absolutely for you. So for this video, I actually really wanted to make a video about the Help to Buy scheme and my personal experience with the Help to Buy scheme. But because of the stamp duty holiday announcement this week and how big that announcement was, I really thought this made a lot more sense for anybody who was seeking to buy a property. I will make another video on Help to Buy next week. So before I get into it, I'm going to specifically be referring to the term solicitor. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a solicitor is, a solicitor is a qualified person in the UK who is responsible for the actual transaction of buying and selling of a property. You absolutely need a solicitor in order to either purchase or sell a property in the UK. So what is the stamp duty? So basically in the United Kingdom, when you buy a property, you pay for a property tax at the point of purchase. And this tax is referred to by different names in each one of the 4 countries that make up the United Kingdom. So England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. But in England and Northern Ireland, it's called the Stamp Duty Land Tax, or SDLT. And this tax is a progressive tax, so it's basically a percentage value of the total property price, and it increases based on as the value of the property goes up. Of course, there are different rules that apply for the SDLT depending on whether you're buying your first property ever, or if you're buying your second property as a rental home, or if you're buying or if you're selling your existing property and moving your house to another property. In other countries, it's also known as a property tax. So basically, you pay the tax every year or on an annual basis. However, in the United Kingdom, it's a one-time tax that you pay upfront when you buy the property. I will get into the specifics of what the values of the property are later on in the video, because they correlate with probably what the stamp duty holiday was and the exemption that was announced this week by the government. So the next thing I want to talk about is, when do you actually pay the stamp duty? This is really important in the context of the stamp duty holiday that was announced. So buying a property in the United Kingdom can be quite a complicated process depending on where you are in the UK. But basically, as part of the buying process, there are 2 fundamental steps that you must absolutely be aware of. So step number 1 is the contract exchange process, and step number 2 is the completion of a property. When you pay the stamp duty tax depends on when the completion actually happens. So just to break it down, the contract exchange process is the process wherein the buyer and the seller of the property in question have agreed to the terms and conditions of the property sale process, and they basically have a written down contract whereby they both sign the contract and the solicitors for both parties exchange the contracts on that day. So that's called the contract exchange. So it's literally an exchange of contracts where the solicitors read out the contract line by line for both parties. And at this point, basically, once you sign and you've exchanged contracts, it means you are legally bound to proceed with the purchase of the property sale. Now, the completion is the point or the actual final step of the property purchase process, where basically you as the buyer are actually going to hand over the funds to the seller in order to complete the process of purchasing the property. So basically that hard-earned deposit that you've been saving up, you basically hand that over to your solicitor. They also get the remainder of the funds from the mortgage lending company. They take those funds and then they hand that over to the seller of the property, and the seller in turn will hand over the keys to you. So this is the point when you can actually move into your property. So after you've completed the purchase, so if you've completed, this is the point from which the clock starts ticking on when you need to pay your stamp duty. So the stamp duty basically needs to be paid within 14 days of completion of the property sale process. So this is really important, because the point at which this has been announced, a lot of transactions on the property market were in flux. So I'm going to get into the benefits later on, very shortly on this video. Point to remember is that completion and contract exchange don't necessarily happen on the same day. So there can be a gap between contract exchange and completion, but this is completely independent and depends on the transaction and the two parties involved. So it can happen on the same day, it can happen on different days, where basically there's an agreement made between the two parties, and this can be anywhere between 1 to 2 weeks. So let's get into the most interesting part of this video. What is the stamp duty holiday and what was the announcement that was made? So due to the extenuating circumstances that the UK economy finds itself and the massive stagnation that the UK property market saw as a result of the illness that was and the pandemic which was announced in March, the property market had completely seized. Now, in order to spur that, Rishi Sunak has announced that any property transaction or sale of up to £500,000 or £500,000 will be exempt from property tax. So you don't pay any property tax on these properties. So the announcement applies until the 31st March 2021. So as long as you complete or the transaction between now and 31st of March 2021, you will be exempt from paying stamp duty. So what does that mean and how much are you going to save? I'm going to specifically be focusing on first-time buyers, because the rules are a little bit different between first-time buyers, people who are moving homes, and people who are investing. Any property purchase over £300,000 is subject to a 5% stamp duty levy. So on your the difference between the 300 and 400,000 pounds, you'd be paying 5%, which would have been 5,000. In the new world, you don't pay any of that. And if it was 500,000 pounds, so you'd be paying 5% over the 200,000 pound difference, which would have been 10,000 pounds, and you don't pay anything. Now, the other point to make is, if you're in England and if you live in London specifically, where property prices can well be over the national average, which is about 250,000 pounds, and you're buying a property over 500,000 pounds up to 950,000 pounds, then you're saving straight off the bat 15,000 pounds, because any property in the old world over 500,000 pounds would not have had any of these exemptions available to them. So you would have had to pay 5% on the full 500,000 pounds as is. Now that's pretty big. So you save 15,000 pounds directly. So in light of the announcement, so you're probably thinking, what does this mean for me as a first-time buyer? Number one, you absolutely save money on the stamp duty tax, which would have previously gone straight to the government. So if you're a first-time buyer and you're buying a property for up to 500,000 pounds or even over 500,000 pounds, you save money depending on the value of your property. And this money, which would have gone straight to the government in the form of a tax, is straight in your pocket that you can use for other things involved in your property purchase process. So point number two, you still need a really big deposit in order to buy a property. So whilst it's great that the government has announced that you save money on the property purchase process through the tax that you would have had to pay, the reality of the situation is that the lenders are unwilling to lend for a loan to value of 90%, or with a 10% deposit you can no longer get the loans that you were getting pre-coronavirus. So I've done quite a bit of research on this, and most big lenders, and I'm talking about the three big lenders, so Nationwide, Barclays and Halifax, are not lending unless you have a loan to value of 85%, which means you need a 15% deposit. Now that's pretty big depending on what type of property you're trying to buy, because getting a deposit in any case has always been really hard. So the reality of the situation is, it's great that you can save money on the stamp duty and potentially you could use some of that money towards your deposit, but you still need the big deposit for being able to get a decent rate and with a big lender. Now I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that you can't get a mortgage with a 10% deposit, but just be aware that you're not going to get the best interest rates on the market, and you're probably not going to be able to get it with a big lender. You'll have to get it with some sort of building society in some random part of this country. So just be aware that that's a caveat that applies. So point number 3 is that whilst the government's announcement sounds great on the face of it, yes, exemption from stamp duty, yay, no stamp duty payments to the government, the reality is that this is not meant to help the first time buyer. Now I'm going to explain this really simplistically. So let's think of the property chain or the property market as a bit of a ladder, right? There are different people at different stages of the ladder. You have people who are yet to enter onto the ladder. So these are kind of your first time buyers. You've got people who already have a property, but they want to move up, or they want to upgrade, or they want to downgrade. So they're trying to sell their property to get on to the next level. And then you've got investment type of people on the property ladder. So you've got the developers, you've got people who have lots of different properties, and they keep buying and selling properties depending on the appreciation of property market. So basically what had happened is nobody on the top 2 levels could move anywhere after the property market seized in March. And that was because the lenders had completely stopped lending to people, and they were saying that you need a big deposit, which is 15%, as I've highlighted before, in order to be able to buy a property. Now with a property tax and with increased lending requirements, you're basically prohibiting anybody in the bottom layer to get onto the property market. Now what that causes is nobody else is then able to buy or sell their property, and the entire property chain basically ceases. Now that then has a knock-on effect on the UK economy, in that jobs in this sector completely die down. So what the government has basically done is they've basically tried to spur the economy by creating an artificial demand, and basically saying that now that you don't have to pay the stamp duty, a lot of people are now jumping on the bandwagon as first-time buyers, using the money that they were previously applied to pay the stamp duty towards their deposit. Now that sounds great, but basically what it does for you as a first-time buyer is it results in property prices going up. So previously, where you had the ability to negotiate with a seller because you were the only person trying to buy the property, there are 4 or 5 other people now trying to buy the same property, and that's going to result in you having to pay possibly a premium on that property. So the people who actually benefit from this whole process are the estate agents, the UK builders, the property developers, the people who are trying to sell their house so that they can buy bigger houses. So bottom line is, whilst you save money on the stamp duty, be aware that you might actually have to pay a slight premium on the same property. So the final conclusion that I wanted to make was, this only benefits people who are now going to purchase or who are yet to complete their property purchase process. So as I highlighted before, if you've completed or if you formally completed the property purchase process just before the announcement, then unfortunately you've missed out on the exemption. So you've missed out on that windfall of £10,000 that you could have really benefited from. Unfortunately, the government is not applying this retrospectively to the beginning of the month or back to March. So unfortunately, you do not benefit from it. However, if you just recently exchanged contracts and you're yet to complete, you probably could still save that money in terms of this is immediate effective from middle of last week. So you could still save money on the stamp duty. Or if you're yet to purchase your property, or if you're in the middle of your transaction, then you're obviously going to benefit from it. The bottom line, yes, absolutely, you benefit from saving on the stamp duty tax and having to pay that to the government. But be aware, you need a big mortgage so to get the best interest rates or the best deal on the market. So you need a 15% deposit in order to get that deal. And two, just be aware that the property prices are going to be artificially inflated during this period because of this increased artificial demand. And also, everybody thinks that I need to absolutely get this done by 31st of March 2021. But the moment that date hits, the property market is just going to go off a cliff unless the whole situation we find ourselves is completely resolved, or the government extends the holiday for another further 6 months, which is quite unlikely because this is a big source of revenue for them. So that's it, guys. I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think as a first-time buyer, whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing, especially if you are looking to buy a property for the first time or trying to get onto the ladder. If you've got any thoughts, just please feel free to add your comments below, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I always release new videos every Sunday. I'll make sure these videos keep coming, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks very much, and bye bye.